hole long before we know
what matters next. It's not a question, but a statement. Tonight, a look at ideas that bring people together here in Hampton Roads and beyond. Good evening, I'm Kathy Lewis. Have you ever heard of TED Talks? It started in 1984 with one conference, some of the world's greatest thinkers coming together at an invitation-only event. Each speaker given only 18 minutes to present his or her greatest ideas. Today, it's a global phenomenon, and while brilliant ideas presented on a bare stage aren't exactly the stuff of TV success these days, the TED Talks have found a home on the internet. In fact, 5 million people have watched TED Talks on YouTube. Now comes TEDx, local programs in the TED tradition, coordinated by communities around the country. Here in Hampton Roads, TEDxNASA debuted last year. This year's TEDxNASA is coming up November 4th, again at the Ferguson Center for the Arts in Newport News. And joining us tonight is Steve Kraft with NASA Langley Research Center's Strategic Relationships Office. He's the organizer of this year's TEDxNASA program. Also with us, Eileen Spillane. She is a public outreach specialist at NASA Langley Research Center, and she is also coordinating speakers for this year's event. Good to have you both with us today.
Thank you
for having us.
You know, TED is an interesting thing. I actually had a listener to our radio program who sort of turned me on to it. I've always been grateful for that. It's sort of the kind of thing that it's a word of mouth kind of deal.
It really
isn't
is.
It?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it is about big ideas.
Yeah.
And so you have to sort of learn about it that way. So when did you first discover it, Steve?
You know, it was probably about 6 or 7 years ago that I've really first started consistently looking at TED. Like I would see one every once in a while, but then it was more like 6 or 7 years ago where I kind of signed up for the podcast and kind of started getting them regularly.
Yeah.
You know, I think TED, to be honest with you, I think they may have accidentally stumbled across this, you know, when they went to this format of the talk of your life in 18 minutes or less. You know, the internet is a great place for that because people won't look at something that's 2 hours long.
Sure.
But for 18 minutes, they might just hang in there.
They might hang in.
And if you've got a really good talk, if you've got a really good idea that you want to convey in 18 minutes or less, that's a great way to do it.
Yeah, and so we should note as well that these are big thinkers from all over, from technology, from the world of entertainment, from the world of design, and the idea is to share ideas.
Yeah, so they even expanded beyond technology, entertainment, and design because they realized if you have good, big thinkers or smart people in any area, and you get a conglomeration of them together, you can really solve some pretty big problems.
And what a challenge to give people to say, you give the speech of your life in 18 minutes. I mean, that really focuses your attention and your energy.
Yeah, so think about like researchers and things. They've been doing research for 30 years. They've got to condense it down into 18 minutes.
Yeah, it's a challenge, but and they're very strict about that too, aren't they? That 18 minutes
strict.
thing. They're extremely strict about it.
Yes.
It's a great point. Well, we got some video for you from the National TED Conference, and all of this video, by the way, is on the internet. So here's a look at what TED is all about.
Actually, we lived in a place called Snitterfield, just outside Stratford, which is where Shakespeare's father was born. Are you struck by a new thought? I was. You don't think of Shakespeare having a father, do you? Do you? Because you don't think of Shakespeare being a child, do you? Shakespeare being 7. I never thought of it. I mean, he was 7 at some point. He was in somebody's English class, wasn't he? Really? How annoying would that be? You know? Must try harder.
And imagine all of the relationships in the external world and any stressors related to any of those, they were gone. And I felt this sense of peacefulness. And imagine what it would feel like to lose 37 years of emotional baggage. Oh, I felt euphoria. And in that moment, my right arm went totally paralyzed by my side. Then I realized, oh my gosh, I'm having a stroke. I'm having a stroke. And then the next thing my brain says to me is, wow, this is so cool. This is so cool. How many brain scientists have the opportunity to study their own brain from the inside out? And then it crosses my mind, but I'm a very busy woman.
Today, we've only explored about 3% of what's out there in the ocean. Already, we found the world's highest mountains, world's deepest valleys, underwater lakes, underwater waterfalls. A lot of that we shared with you from the stage. And in a place where we thought no life at all, we find more life, we think, in diversity and density than the tropical rainforest, which tells us that we don't know much about this planet at all. Here's some algae in the foreground and an octopus. Isn't that amazing?
Okay, finally, we do 683 squared, that's 700 times 666 plus 17 squared is 466,489. Rev up if I need it. Rev up, take the 466, add that to fission to get, 328,489. Good.
What the point here really is that we can do things with the social environment and link all of that together. All of those photos become linked together and they make something emergent that's greater than the sum of the parts. Each of these orange cones represents an image that was discovered to belong to this model. And so these are all Flickr images, and they've all been related spatially in this way. And we can just navigate in this very simple way.
For the most part, the image looks pretty flat and bound to the surface of the screen. But if we turn on head tracking, the computer can change the image that's on the screen and make it respond to the head movement. So let's switch back to that. So this has actually been a little bit startling to the game development community. Because this is about $10 of additional hardware if you already have a Nintendo.
Wow. So those are some of the speakers that have been featured at TED, the big conference, the national conference. There are actually 2 national conferences and then 1 overseas, and it really is quite a global phenomenon. And again, this year, November 4th at the Ferguson Center in Newport News, they're going to have what's called TEDxNASA. 10 to 7 is the time frame for that. TEDxNASA.com, the website. We're glad to have Eileen Spillane today, who's the public outreach specialist for NASA Langley. Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
You have a great job, I suspect, because you're sort of coordinating some of the speakers on the local level. So how do you go about doing that?
Well, it is a great job. It's a lot of fun. And what we do is I serve as one spoke in the wheel of a core team. And we decide and debate on speakers. We come up with a list. And essentially, I just call them and see if they're available and if they can make it, and then work with them to prepare a presentation. I mean, it's really hard for speakers to kind of condense an hour-long talk that they're used to down to 18 minutes. And
it is.
It's been a really satisfying job, really educational on my part, but I think in the broader picture, it's been quite beneficial to the audience that has seen them.
And so, Steve, as you think about the development of this conference locally, give us a sense of that transition from, gosh, I really like that idea of what I've been watching, and now I'm a little bit addicted to it. How do you go from that to let's put on a show?
Yeah. So last year, I think it was about in June timeframe, TED announced. And I've been getting the TED newsletters by this point, right? So TED announced that they were going to try something new, that this was kind of a beta, that they wanted to allow communities to have their own kind of mini TED, right? So they are kind of licensing out the format. And when I saw that, it just hit me that this combination of TED and NASA would just be incredible.
Huge, huge.
So you've got, the big thinkers, the people who are, putting out these great ideas, and an organization that's known for solving a lot of tough problems.
Sure. And
put the 2 of them together. So I registered right away. I didn't ask for permission, I just did.
Yeah.
And I got a call back probably within 30 minutes of registering from the TED folks saying, "Are you kidding me? NASA wants to do a TED conference?" And we said, yeah, and that kind of started from there.
And it was fast, too.
It was fast. We only had about, at that point, probably about 8 weeks to put
It's
together.
unbelievable
the whole
how quickly you all did that. I mean, it really is. If you know anything about what it takes to plan an event of that magnitude, it was really quite an extraordinary thing to pull that off.
Yeah, we had
in 8
23
weeks.
speakers. So
yeah, I mean, it's just it really is amazing. And so we should note as well, though, that not all the speakers are. I mean, speakers are from all over the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're not just. It's not a NASA conference.
No, it's definitely not a NASA conference. In fact, there were a few people at NASA that were kind of disappointed. We only had 3 NASA speakers out of 23.
Yeah.
And also, I think what's unique about it is, and what was hard to sell to kind of headquarters and stuff is, it's a very different kind of conference for us. We're used to doing the technical conferences where people give papers and they talk about their data and all that kind of stuff. But that's not what I wanted. I wanted this to be more creative, more innovative, and I also wanted to engage what I say, both sides of the brain.
Yeah.
So we have all the analytical thinkers, but I wanted to also bring in artists and musicians and more right brain thinkers kind of thing, and let's use both sides of our brain for a change, right?
Right.
So
well, in fact,
we tried to combine them. Yeah.
And a wonderful job was done with that as well. We have some of the tape from last year's TEDxNASA, and this is a sense of what you'll be able to enjoy this year.
NASA is synonymous with innovation and thought leadership, and TEDx is about ideas worth spreading. So bringing these organizations together is truly creating a space for game-changing ideas.
You have to dream big. You have to dream big, long, solid dreams, and then figure out how to make those dreams become a reality.
The question is simply, what if? What if? When you ask the question, what if you open up the possibilities? What if I could do that? How would that happen? I know I can't, but what if I could? I know this is crazy, but what if we could? The minute you ask that question, you have reprogrammed your brain on a foundational level that you are now no longer looking for reasons you can't. You're looking for reasons you can.
We believe that in a 1-hour flight, we can rewrite the textbook on Mars by making high-resolution measurements of the atmosphere, looking for gases of biogenic origin, looking for gases of volcanic origin, studying the surface, studying the magnetism on the surface, which we don't understand, as well as about a dozen other areas.
You are some of the brightest minds in the world. But I want you to leave here and leave this conference recognizing that sometimes the most creative solutions aren't rocket science.
Fasten your seatbelts, it's going to be a bumpy ride. I'm here to talk to you about the universe between our ears, the last great frontier of science. I'm here to tell you that we'll know more about parallel universes, colliding galaxies, and black holes long before we know what's in between our ears. This is the last great frontier of science. When I talk to young people, I say if you want to do something wimpy, you go into rocket science. Rocket science is for wimps. The real action is neuroscience.
But what are we going to set in motion? What are we going to do with that opportunity? The precedents that we set in this next era as we start to take our first steps into space are going to have a profound impact on the future of our species. We're going to set a tone for what kind of society we're going to be when we're scattered out and running 12 different star systems.
And it's not just about making our airplanes more environmentally friendly. It's about making these lean, green flying machines serve our planet and address its changing needs. This future transportation system will enable opportunities and prosperity beyond what any of us can imagine. And at NASA, we are so ready to create that space.
A country preacher decides that he's going to put the fear of God into his congregation in his small parish one Sunday. And so he comes out and he begins his sermon by saying, remember, everyone in this parish is going to die. And he notices this one guy up front is kind of smiling. He says, what are you so happy about? The guy says, I'm not from this parish. I'm just visiting my sister.
This is just to show you that if you have cameras or different type of sensors, because it is tall, it's 1.8 meters tall, you can see over obstacles and bushes and those kind of things.
All of our lives are built on the moments that have created us, the good ones and the bad ones. They show us who we are and who we're not. And then we, in turn, off that create moments as well. And then we do the same more and more, and then it's called life. The bottom line is, if you're lucky, you get just over 28,000 days to play on this little blue ball we call Earth. And I don't know if recognizing that step process of thought, word, and deed will add years to your life, but I guarantee you this, understanding that moments matter will add life to your years.
The astounding thing about those elements is that those are part of 18-minute speeches they just come at you one after the other after the other. It really is an amazing thing. So one of the things that people will inevitably want to know, Eileen, is who's speaking this year, right?
And that's right. And then I get the job to tell them, I'm not allowed to say.
Yeah.
And we do that on purpose because we want people to...
And it's a TED policy, right?
Yeah, so TED has a policy where they want to give everybody an equal stage. Right, so if we have some bigger names than others, right, then especially for our event where it's free, people might only come to see
and that's a good reason,
certain speakers. And what we want to do is we want to expose them. There's some other good ideas out there. We want to expose them to everything.
And that's a great point, because I think sometimes people will have that opportunity if they come with an open mind and don't know. And I guess that's a piece of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So as you are talking to these people and sort of getting them all squared away for this year, you have a success to point to from last year. Is that huge? I mean, is that a great advantage?
It is wonderful because last year it was tough,
Sure.
not
We're
having
doing a new show. Come down.
Right, the first annual. But now we have an amazing website to point them to. We've got the numbers and really we have the name, NASA. And a lot of the speakers, being professional speakers, know TED in and of itself. So it's a big honor for them.
Yeah, so we don't pay our speakers anything either. So, it's really a job on our part.
Indeed.
And Eileen's part to convince them that it's a good thing to do.
It's a good thing to do. And here's the other piece of it. Since the speakers don't get paid, it's free. That to me is the most amazing part of the whole thing.
Absolutely.
And there just aren't many opportunities in life like that where you can get together with people who are really interested in big ideas.
Well, and the great thing about TED and TEDx conferences are that in between, we'll maybe have a 2-hour session or so, and in between, we'll stop and have a breakout session so that the people in the audience can network and collaborate in the lobby and meet people that they never
So when you
might have
say a
met
breakout
before.
session, is that something like, let's talk about what we've just heard? Or
Absolutely.
that kind of thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah, the part of the intent is to get these combinations of people together in the audience to start really thinking about this big idea they just saw. And to start discussing. And we heard, after the event last year, we heard so many stories about how people had figured out how to do something a little bit different or had partnered with somebody new.
Yeah.
And here in the community that happened several times. And these are people that, probably every day they just don't have that, like you were saying, they don't have that opportunity to get together with the right people to make this happen.
And just to stimulate the audience even more, we have a fantastic group that works on decorating the lobby and bringing in exhibits and NASA technology, musicians, so that when they go out into the audience, if they're talking with other community members, but they can also see some of the other things that NASA's doing, the booths that we have.
And I think so many times we get stuck in our own idea, which is, well, I'm just me, and I'm here in Hampton Roads, Virginia. Those are the big, lofty thinkers. They're the ones who are going to get it done. But the truth of the matter is, it's that fusion, that energy, the synergy that comes when I have a piece of the puzzle, you have a piece of the puzzle, then we all get together and we realize that we really have something.
Well, and I have to say, NASA has gotten a little bit insular too, where we don't look outside enough.
Yeah.
And getting some of our scientists and engineers to mingle with artists and musicians and things was kind of, at first they're kind of like, this doesn't make sense. Why would I do that?
Right.
But I think I really got so many comments back after the thing last year where it really did get them to think about things differently.
And we want to make sure that they know too that these, the folks at NASA, I just want to make sure that we have time to work this in, but the folks, speaking of getting out in the community, October 8th is the start of this terrific program. NASA's going to be going into the schools. What's happening with that?
Well, I feel privileged to be the spokesperson for that. Thomasina Woods, Dr. Thomasina Woods, is the project lead, and she had this amazing idea to get 1,000 classrooms with a NASA speaker in them. And again, the kickoff
right here
date,
in Hampton Roads.
Right here, we have 16 school districts, and they are not limited to, but Newport News, Williamsburg, Norfolk, but we also have private magnet and parochial schools involved. And it's K through 12, and it's just getting a NASA employee out into the classroom to do a demonstration, an activity, but to inspire and educate the students about STEM, education, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and to let them know what NASA's doing.
Right.
So it's a really great initiative. And what's really cool is we have really neat souvenirs for all the kids in the classrooms. So
people love that stuff.
Oh, totally, totally, and they're great.
So you also have, and we just have about a minute left, but you also have TEDx Youth coming up.
Yeah,
right?
so this year is going to be the first year that we are taking on something completely new. One of the suggestions that came up after last year's event was, why don't we do something like this for kids?
Yeah.
And
why don't you?
And other places,
so we are.
Other places had similar ideas, and it started to grow. And so we were also one of the first to sign up to do a TEDx Youth at NASA event. That's going to be from the Virginia Air and Space Center.
That's great. On November 20th is the date
on November
for that.
20th.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's going to be a marvelous opportunity. You know, you get these fertile young minds and start talking to them about big ideas and convincing them that they can have just as many big
and we'll
ideas
have a
as other people
combination
do.
of kid speakers and adult speakers.
Fantastic.
That address them, and it'll be a little bit different feel to it because, of course, we want to entertain and keep the attention of all of those kids.
Edutainment.
Edutainment, that's right. So the big event for TED is November 4th at the Ferguson Center in Newport News. It's free. No reason for you not to go. You'll meet some nice people. I think you'll have a great time. I'll be back in a moment with a final thought. This month's edition of Fast Company features TED Talks, the mothership on which TEDxNASA is based. The author, Anya Kamenetz, posits that TED's creating a new Harvard, the first new top prestige education brand in more than 100 years. To be clear, she's not talking about TED being a literal substitute for the ivy-colored walls, the person-to-person campus connections, the after-class interactions, and the time spent over coffee grappling with ideas until you find your own. But she argues that to a broader extent, these community-based TEDx conferences, like the one NASA's delivering here in November, actually deliver many of the benefits of college. The opportunity to listen to a lecture in person and interact with the presenter afterward. It's also a great way to meet fellow travelers on the journey of big ideas. And when inspired people drink from the fire hose of cutting-edge thought that is TED and TEDx, amazing things could happen. So I hope you'll give TEDxNASA a whirl. And who knows, you just may be inspired enough to take in one of the nearly 800 talks at TED.com. And that's where you'll find some of the greatest thinkers in the world delivering ideas worth spreading in an 18-minute speech of their lives. But Virginia Heffernan, a New York Times writer and self-described TED addict, warns that you should stay away from listening to the top 10 most popular. You're better off, she says, choosing the ones that most appeal to you. Of TED, Heffernan says, I love their greed for hope, their confidence and ingenuity, their organized but goofy ways of talking and thinking. And you know, you could do worse things with 18 minutes. Now, before we go, we've got great news about the extension of an art exhibit at the Chrysler Museum. This is Johannes Vermeer's Young Woman Seated at a Virginal, and it's on display at the Chrysler. It's been extended now through the end of the year. So how did this 300-plus-year-old painting end up at the Chrysler? Well, the executive director, Bill Hennessy, has the story behind this work from the famed Dutch painter.
I think there are few artists in history whose name has the magic of Johannes Vermeer. Vermeer's a wonderfully mysterious guy. Not only did he paint very slowly and very carefully so that there aren't many works by him, but the results were simply magical. I mean, no one could capture sort of soft, silvery light the way he could. Don't know, however, whether this was a commission, a portrait, so it's a specific person, or whether this might just have been a model that Vermeer said, sit down, put your hands on the keyboard, let me paint not so much you as an individual person, but the quality of the light flowing over you and the color of your outfit. The instrument she's playing is called a virginals. It was a kind of primitive version of a portable harpsichord where the strings are plucked. It makes a very soft, almost lute-like sound. And she's set it up in her room. clearly a window off on the left-hand side of the picture through which this soft Dutch light is coming in and kind of flowing over her. Illuminates her face, it picks up a little crick on her elbow where she's reaching out to touch the keyboard. And then just so it's not all soft grays and blues and yellows, it gives her these great little barrettes in her hair that are a great red accent. It's a kind of symphony of color. You know, we're very lucky here at the Chrysler to have a group of trustees that are miraculously well connected in the art world. And one of our trustees, Linda Kaufman, who is herself a distinguished collector, not just of the American furniture you see in this room, but of Dutch paintings, put us in touch with a private collector in New York who has very graciously shared half a dozen of his very best pictures with us for the summer. They're all painters from the so-called Dutch Golden Age, this amazing moment in the middle of the 17th century when Holland was just about the most prosperous country in the world, great appetite for great art, and miraculously, great group of painters emerged to fill that need. People like Rembrandt and Frans Hals, Gabriel Metsu, Peter de Hoek, and in our case here, most notably, Johannes Vermeer. Only through scientific testing and some good historical research have people been able to piece together the history of the picture. And what they've discovered is that the canvas this picture is painted on is almost certainly cut from the same bolt of cloth that was used for a painting called The Lacemaker that's in the Louvre in Paris. And that, no one could create this atmosphere of peace. No one could orchestrate his colors, his blues and his yellows and his grays to work together with such wonderful harmony. It's looking at one of his pictures is like listening to music.
Oh, the light in that painting is just spectacular, and again, that's on display at the Chrysler through December 31st. So I do hope you'll get a chance to get over there to see that at the Chrysler Museum of Art. Now, just remember that you can also watch any of our programs online. It's whatmatters.tv, and while you're there, you can tell us what you think. Sign up for our weekly newsletter so we can let you know what we have in the works here on What Matters, and I hope that you will join us next time for another look at what matters.